It seems impossible that one person can actually impact so many lives. But the women that we're going to talk about today have and continue to do so. And doing so, they've also heavily contributed to nation building. Who are these women? These are the women in the civil services. They have walked that extra mile and made a difference despite so many pressures. Today, we're talking about the book Women of Influence 10 Extraordinary IAS Careers by Rajni Sekhri Sibal, who is herself is an IAS officer. She topped the civil services examination in 1986 and worked as a secretary to the government of India. She's also an unsung hero and has written 7 books. First of all, I don't even understand how she's gotten the time to write the 7 books, but we're going to ask her that too. But what I found very interesting when I read this book, that this is a must read, I think, for every woman, not just women in the civil services, because it's really about strength, it's about courage, and it's about women in leadership. And whether you're in corporate or in government services, the skills required are the same if you want to make a difference. So, welcome. We're so excited to have you here, Rajni ji.
Thank you so much. Namaskar to you and to your readers. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, the first thing what happened when I picked up your book was this question that what is influence? It made me think. And I said, I need to ask you that because when I saw the title of your book, Women of Influence, that's the first thing that went in my mind.
Influence would mean different things to different people, but in the context in which it is used in the book, influence is basically the ability um, to traverse through life by mobilizing, by strategizing, by making inputs into plan, processes, and policy in such a manner that they affect everybody's lives. So your ability to affect the life of somebody else, to touch somebody else's life and make a difference, that is influence.
So beautifully said, and you've written about it so beautifully in your book as we go through these stories. And these are stories that I would say are almost written as short stories. You can pick one up, just read it, and it gives you a little bit of glimpse into these women's life and the fact that they've influenced, especially when we look at India, millions and even billions of people, that their policies, the work that they have done. But what made you specifically want to write this book?
Well, I have been in the IAS for the last 38 years, and in between, I took a hiatus for a few years to join the private sector. I helped put together the Max Bupa insurance company in
Mhm.
2006, and then I came back. Now, the question that you're asking, I'm actually giving a detail on why it all happened. Because when I rejoined, I joined in the middle of a year, and my CA asked me because the pay packet in the private sector is so different from what it is there in the government. So why did you want to come back? The comeback was a concerted, conscious decision because of what you said. Uh, the influence, the effect, the canvas that you have within the government is so vast that anything you do, any decision you take, any act of omission or commission can change lives. And that's the reason I wanted to come back. So, having lived a life where everything you do makes for some major changes in somebody else's lives, I had this thought about this book long ago. How it happened was during the lockdown. During the lockdown, a kind of you had more time on your hands. I just superannuated as Secretary Government of India, and I remember after a very long, acerbic, vitriolic kind of debate on TV where pull the IS down, whip the IS was the main theme. So my daughter, our children go through the same trials and travails and tribulations that we go through in our lives. So they've seen it from very close quarters. And she told me, Ma, why don't you just change the narrative? Write about yourself, write all that you've been through and the courage it takes to actually do stuff. with so much pressure, with so many difficulties, so many hardships, not just physical, some mental and stressful situations as well. I did the next best thing. I am a little reticent. I didn't talk about myself. I have these 10 stories, which are amazing women who've walked that extra mile, who've, made that contribution, which is positive, despite all the problems. And these are situations that I could relate to. So I put them together in this book called Women
And
of
I would
Influence.
say they're all unsung hero because even when I was reading your book, this theme was consistent. None of the women actually wanted to talk about themselves. They just wanted to talk about their work, which is also very similar because there's kind of like this thing that let the work speak. But it's great to hear these stories because they motivate us so much. And they give us this kind of thing that, look, maybe if she could do it, I can maybe make a pin drop of a difference too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the other reason. One was, of course, to change the narrative that, a babu, the kind of word that is used in a derogatory manner. I don't think anyone means well when they say Naukar Shahi and babu in Hindi. They're trying to pull down the other person and say that, oh, the person doesn't perform or the person only sits in the office and is not accessible.
Moves files.
Yes, just moves file up and down, which are dusty and rather full of red tape. Uh, None of these women, if you read the book, you'll realize that they don't fit into that mode at all. So one reason I wrote was this, and the other reason was definitely what you said. That this whole feeling that here is a person who could be me. In that situation, could I possibly have done the same thing? Maybe, because my what drives me is the same, right? I hope that's what my readers feel when they read the book.
No, absolutely. I think they will. But we want to understand something about your influences too before we get into these 10 women of influence.
Let me not talk about me being influenced. Let me talk about people who influenced my life. So one was definitely my father. In fact, that's just not me. You put about 20 people in a room and ask them who influenced you the most, you'll find at least 40% will say my parent, one parent or the other. One was definitely my father, who died very young, but was a diabetic, juvenile diabetic, and he left a strong mark in my life. But within my workspace, within the career, there were so many people who just I would look up to, and even these 10 ladies, wow. I just, if you start to read them, I mean, if I go from page chapter 1 to chapter 10, I find the courageous women, who were barely 22, 23, 24 in their first jobs. One is not scared of the sand mafia. She can bear, she's barely 5 feet tall. She's not scared of the sand mafia in UP. The other is like standing all alone against a large crowd that's angry because of a death in police custody. There's another one who is in a Naxalite area where the minister tells her, why is it that you're posted here? We shouldn't be posting you here. A girl from Tamil Nadu in Maharashtra. We should actually get you out of this place. It's Kalapani. They used to call it Kalapani. And this girl turns around and says, no, I don't want to. And then there are these fantastic, planners and people who walk that extra mile, like Ottama, the first story where, in 1965, she is the first and only person who's looking after a district which is on the border of the Indo-Pak during the Indo-Pak conflict, and it even is sensitive enough to see that other women have access to her. They try and take off these social taboos, like take off the veil
No, but I love
talking
the
to her.
fact that women would just come to say and see that there is a woman collector. And look at what a difference that made, right? Even for those women, they would walk miles just to see that, oh my goodness, here is what a woman could have achieved. And here she is sitting. And they couldn't believe it. So it was amazing.
It's so empowering to see somebody else, sitting there, somewhere who could easily be you. You kind of lived that life, just watching someone do well. Yeah.
But one of the things I found quite inspirational, because of course, you speak quite openly about the threats and the security, which can be daunting to anyone. But these women really even took on that with courage. They did not let that weigh them down or pursue the path that they were on.
Yeah. So the threats and the security issues are, I mean, they're not gender specific. Let me just be frank with that, and they are there for everybody who's there on the job. Uh, the difference between a winner and one who is not a winner is that while the winner in the dark will get up despite the dark and light a lamp, the loser will not. Will just sit back and crib and say, oh my God, how dark it is and how pressured I am and how much trouble I have and who will be able to sort it out. But there are a lot of people out there. I mean, I have just picked up 10. There are a lot of people who are, doing these jobs quietly, silently, consistently, with a lot of conviction and living a life where the goal is much larger than your own selfish needs, living for a larger societal goal and working towards it. So it is daunting initially when you're young, when someone turns around and says कि बच्चे उठा के ले जाएंगे. It is daunting for a while. You kind of wonder, and then you let it go and say try, just try. I mean, it happens once, it happens twice, and it's all empty. The threats, sometimes the threats are not empty. But somebody has to be a trailblazer, right? Yeah.
No, and these women definitely, I think two that have really stuck out in my mind, they're all 10 are amazing. One, of course, please do tell us more, the polio story, and the one about education, because these two have really made such a change that we don't even realize how much of today that we are living in is because of them.
So the polio story is this wonderful person called Anuradha Gupta, and I hope she listens to this wherever she is because she's one person I'm very fond of. We became friends over the years, but what I heard from her about this is something that amazed me also. For example, all of us know that India has been polio free for the last so many years. Since 2011, we haven't had a single case of wild polio, but you've seen people with polio, and it's a very debilitating disease. It's at that point of time, India, Pakistan, there were just 4 countries which were still continuing to have polio, and India was one of them. The rest of the world was polio free. And vaccines, as they're important now, were important then. And for some reason, India had been continuing to be on what's called a mission mode for 15 long years.
Yeah, 90%, but we were not able to cross it.
Never crossing beyond 90. Now, if you're still 10% unvaccinated, you're still open to the disease. I mean, you're prone to it, it'll keep spreading. So, what she did was ask different questions. It's just thinking out of the box. The questions before she came were how many people have been covered? What's the coverage? Which state has done what? And then you keep trying to increase the coverage. She started asking a different question. So, how many people are not covered? And which are the ones that are not covered? Now, let's just focus on them. So, the spotlight was put on those. And I think they went through this whole process where, when you're, I just thought not just strategic thinking, there was a lot of uh, a desire to actually ensure that India was, polio free, which she fought um, on the financial front, on the international front, in the office, amongst non-believers, and also you have these very rigorous procedures, processes, especially with the World Bank funded program and where the WHO comes in. Not too many people have the courage to say, I don't want World Bank funding, I'll find funding of my own and we'll continue to do what we think is right. She did that. So I thought that was tremendous. And I don't want to give out too much about the story because I don't want.
Yes, no, but it's a beautiful one. And I think one that, really, really, I mean, it touched my heart. The second one, of course, was the one on education. The fact that the right to education for every child. Please tell a little bit about that also.
So Anita Kaul is this beautiful person who you will be surprised I've met for a very short spell. When I was in Missouri, I was training the IAS students there, and we called her up for a lecture. But I'd heard about her, I'd seen her work, I'd read about her work. And when I started to delve deeper, and I spoke to her husband, her son, because by the time I started to write the book, she had passed away. And she has done this. Anita was unique in terms of, she was almost like an activist. She was a little more than a bureaucrat. And she was one person that um, a normal person, a person within the service would say, oh, she's more activist like. And they didn't mean it very nicely, but she took it as a compliment. And people outside felt that she is our link to the government. She's like us. So while everybody, like in the Vidhan Sauda in Karnataka, in Bangalore, when ministers and other public servants, civil servants walked down the corridor, people would just, the clerks and the peons would edge back and stay away. When Anita walked down, everybody came forward and swarmed around her and wanted to know, how are you? And how. So it just speaks for the kind of person she was, because not only did she go out and realize that she needed to involve the people, because the power, in fact, the story is called Power of the People. So she says that everything that becomes successful, even the right to education, even a new kind of education system, has to be first coming. I mean, the people have to get involved. You can't just do it in a vacuum. And the other thing that she realized was that she used to work, I don't know what, 20 hours a day and constantly travel. So she knew that nobody, including the parents who were complaining then, because, oh, so where are the where are the textbooks? What about homework? What about exams? Who's going to? So they're used to a different kind of thing. Well, we don't want our child to go through all this kind of thing. But she realized that the only people who would actually thank her for this were the children, who would go through that wonderful experience of having a life, having a joyful learning in their childhood. She thought that was enough. That was enough award, and she died without any award, anyone even knowing about it, and most people not talking about it. And I'm so happy to have written the story after she. I wish she were alive to read it. Actually,
It's
honestly.
a beautiful story. But civil services is still the dream career. It's the aspiration. It's, when we look at it, we may say babus or whatever, but deep in our hearts, we know that it's grueling and it's very tough to get to. But one in which still, unfortunately, women are still 21%. Your book, hopefully, I hope, will motivate many, many women, many girls. But how can we change these statistics? And why is it important for us to change these statistics?
Well, so two things. Since let me just first of all say that once you're within the service, it really doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It's gender neutral. What matters is whether you perform or you don't, whether you're conscientious or you're not, whether you're committed or not, whether you actually are able to deliver or not. That is the difference. But to get in, indeed, I remember in the 1950s, the first woman who got in was asked, "Are you sure you want to join? I mean, would you really think of a different career?" And also, women at that time, if they got married, had to decide either to get married or to give up. This went on till the mid 50s. And by the time I joined in 1986, I think the percentage was very 10%. We were a batch of about 130. We were, in fact, less than that, 8.5%. Now I'm so happy to say it's 21. It should go higher because there's no reason. I mean, women are as intelligent and as men, and vice versa. There is no gender divide between intelligence or brightness. The only thing is, for some reason, girls do not take the exam. So if you compare the number of girls who qualify as against the number of girls who take the exam, it's quite high. Simply because it is thought that girls may not, need not have a career. It doesn't really matter for them, and so on and so forth, which is actually not true. I mean, with time, things are changing. Most girls want a job, most of them want to work. The trouble is also that the exam is indeed grueling, right? So I
Very difficult.
yeah, so I know that when once you do it once, you do it twice. I think third time round, when people do it, you don't want to do it anymore. But now I'm told there are lots of chances. When I was there were three chances that you were given. You keep hearing of people who say six chances and so on. I don't think girls are given that much latitude in their houses, in their, you know, okay, try the exam once, otherwise get married. Try the exam the second time, otherwise find another. I think uh, also in the hinterland, there's lack of awareness, a little lack of awareness that these careers are open to women. So one is the motivation, the other is this um, society doesn't expect them to work. I mean, it's not a necessity. So, and it's
Yeah,
not a
and
career that you.
yeah, and we hope that this will be changing, and I hope books like yours will definitely inspire more and more women. But one of the ones that's constant, and I think that also comes into people's mind, is this work-life balance issue. Because, especially when you hear about it, people can get transferred, you'll have to move anywhere. So is that also one of the reasons that a lot of people may shy away from such a career?
That everybody in every career has to kind of handle it their way. It is an issue. It is a balance that you have to arrive at, and each of us finds our way. It is a little more difficult, especially during the field postings. It is tough. I agree with you, because you're supposed, when you're a deputy commissioner, for instance, or an STM, you're supposed to be on duty 24 hours. I mean, you could be called at any time. Your office is within the residence. I've been called at 1 o'clock at night and 3. And there are days I've not. During elections, nobody sleeps. You're just, I'm giving one instance, but if there's a flood, for instance, or some sort of a disaster, there's no way you're. So it is true. What I've learned is that you need to completely excise your family life from your office. If you're able to, whatever you do in office, leave it in office. Don't bring your files home at all, and don't and leave your brain, your mind,
Leave your mind.
there as well. And when you're at home, when you're at work, you need to just switch off from the house. You can't keep constantly. Yeah.
Well, that's very good advice for all us women, because this is the one issue I think that we constantly, struggle with. Because when you're at the office, you're worried about what the kids are doing at home, and when you're at home, you're worried about what's happening at the office.
And of no value, because your worrying is not going to help anything. So it's better. Like I would not. Uh, I'll give you one instance, for example. In finance, at one point of time, I was one of the women and one of the girls who's looking after finance in Haryana, the state that I belonged to, and there were three other men. And what would happen is, while the men they had the ability, and why not, to chat up and talk during the day and discuss stuff. And some of it was official, some of it was just a chat over tea and stuff. I never wanted to, because to me it was so important to finish my work and go home as soon as possible, because the kids are waiting. So there is that gender divide. So whereas a girl, including me, would just possibly go to office and work, no stopping in between, just continue to work and come home as soon as possible. A lot of men do it at their own pace. They work for a bit and then take a little break, and then because there's nothing that's really well, they're not really truly, or they don't think they are truly responsible for the child's homework and for other things. Yeah, so I think that little difference is there. A difference.
Now, coming back though to these 10 women, after you compiled them, was there a common thread? Was there something that you saw that was running across all of them? And what is that big learning that you took away
Oh wow.
and that we can all take away?
Okay, so I think it's not a bad idea now to read from my author's note here, because
Please.
honestly, what you said is true. That they are all so different. They come from different backgrounds. They belong to different age groups. I mean, 1965 to 2017, and so there's the different genres, different generations, different academic backgrounds, different family backgrounds, but there are these commonalities. There's a thread that runs. Rather than reading, let me just speak about it across all, which I think, if I look at it in terms of the work, was thus. One was, of course, what you kind of alluded to in the beginning, that they are all women who think that their work is important, that the work should speak for itself, And I don't have to go around tom-tomming about myself. I don't have to put up a show, go to the media and say, look, I did this. And, they're not out for publicity for the sake of, they work for the people. They have a larger cause. That's one. The other thing I found amongst all of them was that each one worked consistently, diligently, conscientiously every single day. I mean, they're not slackers. It's not that, I do a spurt of work when someone is watching and then I go back and relax. No, I do it because it's important. The second thing I found was this huge amount of courage, immense courage. There is this, I think, wrong feeling amongst, especially in patriarchal societies, that women, because they're softer, they're more gentle, they speak not too loudly. So they can be a pushover, and that you can kind of just walk over them and push them or bully them into doing something. No, not at all. You must have seen it in your own life. Most women will stand up much more courageously against any kind of pressure, when they believe. And another thing that ran amongst all 10 of them was this immense belief in one thing: the Constitution of India. There was one book that mattered to all of them, the Constitution of India.
And
And
I think that making that change for also the greater good of India, you know?
absolutely, the good is larger than my own name, my own work, my own promotion, my own anything else.
No, so that's why it's, I mean, like sometimes I think when you read those stories, you really feel that and you feel that sense of gratitude, because once you kind of put it together and you realize how many people are actually working towards making and striving to make this nation better every single day,
I
you
know, I
know.
goosebumps. When I talk about these things, because many years ago when I took the exam, and you did say that I topped, half of it was also because my interview went out very well. In the interview, when they asked me, they continually asked us to ask the same question even now. What I said then could have sounded cheesy for a 23-year-old, because they asked me, so why are you taking the civil service exam and what do you want to do? And I said it with confidence and with stars in my eyes. And I said, it's because I want to serve the nation. I continue to say that 38 years later. I'm not looking for anything. I'm not looking to get into a UPSC job or anything. I continue to say that I worked because I wanted to serve my nation. And to me, that was one way that I could do it. And that's the reason I even came back from the private sector, went out for a while to put together something, but came back. I think I feel blessed.
So
That
I think we are also all blessed, but we also love to know what's next for you. What is that next big thing? You've written 7 books. First of all, how do you find the time? And what's next?
okay, let me answer. How do I find the time? You're right. I write because I am, uh, I have to write. I think I can't find any word better than that. I write because I have to write. And I've written since I was a child. I've written forever. I've written for myself. But publishing happened in 2011 was the first time that the books got published. Or maybe one was in 2005 also. But that was again. So I have some career related books which I continued to write for 1 or 2 hours a day prior to going to my office. Yeah, that was a commitment to myself. I would write for 2 hours every single day. So it took a little longer. Poetry, I've got 2 published poetries. I write as and when the mood takes, and when the desire to write is there.
And it's
These
beautifully written because it's written like stories. So, I mean, so for the people that are watching and are going to see this, it's actually written as a story and it's actually beautifully expressed.
Thank you so much, because it can be very boring to write a biography. Biographies. These are incidents which I thought needed to be shared. And had I not shared them, written them like this, I don't think people would have heard about them or learned about them. I found it very sweet. There are 2 best friends, a lady that talked to me. She says, my God, she is a friend of mine for the last 30 years, but she's never told me about this. So I mean, things like that. So I'm so happy I was able to do this. And as for what next, wow. So my next book is almost finished. It's a book on Guru Nanak's Sakhis. And I find, for me, Guru Nanak has always been the wisest, most rational, um, immensely gratifying person who walked the earth. And so I thought somewhere the Sakhis that my grandmother told me, and I've heard orally because they passed on as an oral.
Yes.
No longer grandmothers tell their grandchildren stories. Not many do. There's not also COVID has kind of prevented that kind of
Now
thing.
we just say, "Hey Alexa, play the story."
It's about time that youngsters saw Guru Nanak for who he was, as a child when he was born, as what he was to his parents, what, the questioning mind that he had, which continued to question rites, rituals, and learn more, and look towards the absolute truth. So that's my next book that's coming out. But the other thing I'm doing is I'm writing for children. So I'm not bringing out books there. I'm trying to have this platform called A Dandelion Dream, which has both prose and poetry. For I thought Humpty Dumpty's fallen too often, so we need to do something different. Tiny talk for children and for young adults as well. So I am putting that together, this platform. It should come out soon. Yes.
Well, best of luck, and I know it will be super successful. And thank you for inspiring us and motivating us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Such a pleasure to meet you. Bye bye.